The night Lorenzo De Luca killed his first man, he was 17 years old, and he didn't feel a thing. Not the weight of the gun in his hand, not the spray of blood across his white shirt, not even the hollow thud of the body hitting the warehouse floor. His father had clapped him on the shoulder afterward, pride gleaming in his dark eyes. "Now you're a De Luca," he'd said, as if emotion was a luxury their family couldn't afford. 17 years later, Lorenzo had built an empire on that same emptiness. At 34, he ruled the De Luca syndicate with an iron fist wrapped in expensive Italian leather. His enemies whispered his name like a curse. His allies treated him like a god they feared to displease. And the women who warmed his bed, actresses, models, socialites, they all learned the same lesson eventually. Lorenzo De Luca's heart was a vault that had never been opened. He preferred it that way. Love was a weakness. Attachment was a liability. In his world, sentiment got you killed, but the Italian Mafia Commission had other plans. The meeting took place in a private room at Perch, a French restaurant perched high above downtown Los Angeles. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled beneath them like a kingdom of lights and shadows, a kingdom Lorenzo had spent years conquering, block by bloody block. 5 men sat around the table, representatives of the oldest crime families on the West Coast. At the head sat Giovanni Russo, the commission's mediator, his silver hair immaculate, his expression grave. "The blood feud between the De Lucas and the Morettis has gone on long enough," Giovanni announced, his voice carrying the weight of decades. 12 years of warfare, hundreds dead, millions lost. It ends now. Lorenzo leaned back in his chair, his charcoal suit perfectly tailored, his expression carved from marble. "I'm listening." "A marriage," Giovanni said simply. "You will marry Valentina Moretti. The alliance will unite both families. Peace, at last." The room fell silent. Lorenzo's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only sign of emotion he allowed himself. "You want me to marry the daughter of the man who murdered my mother." "Antonio Moretti did not kill your mother," Giovanni said carefully. "The circumstances of that night remain. He was there." Lorenzo's voice dropped to something dangerous, something that made even these powerful men shift in their seats. "He pulled the trigger, or he gave the order. It doesn't matter which. It matters to the peace." Giovanni folded his hands. "Valentina Moretti is not her father, and this alliance is not a request, Lorenzo. It's a decree from the commission. You refuse, and the De Luca syndicate stands alone against every family in California." Lorenzo's fingers drummed once against the table's edge. A calculated risk assessment played behind his cold eyes. War on all fronts would be costly. His people would suffer, his empire would fracture, and for what? Pride? "When?" he asked flatly. "The engagement dinner is in 3 days, the wedding in 6 weeks. Tradition requires you live together for 1 month before the ceremony." Giovanni slid a folder across the table. "Her file." Lorenzo didn't touch it. "I don't need to study my enemy to marry her." "Then you'll be unprepared." Giovanni stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "Because Valentina Moretti is not like the women you're accustomed to, Lorenzo. She won't simper or obey. She won't be your decoration. Then what will she be?" Giovanni smiled grimly. "Your equal, whether you like it or not." 3,000 miles away, in a converted loft in the Arts District, Valentina Moretti lay prone on a rooftop, her eye pressed to the scope of a custom-built Accuracy International rifle. The target sat in his penthouse across the street, oblivious, sipping whiskey and celebrating a deal that would have destroyed her father's shipping operations. He'd made the mistake of thinking the Morettis were weak, distracted by the De Luca conflict. He'd learn otherwise in approximately 30 seconds. Valentina's finger rested on the trigger, her breathing slow and controlled. The wind was minimal tonight, a perfect shot. Through her earpiece, her spotter's voice crackled. "Target acquired. You're clear." "Confirmed," she whispered. Her heartbeat slowed. The world narrowed to the crosshairs and the target's temple. She'd done this 47 times before. 47 men who'd threatened her family, who'd underestimated her because she was a woman, because she was beautiful, because they thought Moretti's daughter was just a pretty face to parade at parties. She squeezed the trigger. The shot was perfect, silent, clean. The target slumped forward, whiskey glass tumbling from his hand. "Confirmed kill." her spotter reported. Exfil in 90 seconds. Valentina was already moving, breaking down her rifle with practiced efficiency, packing it into a nondescript gym bag. She descended the fire escape in darkness, melting into the alley below, just another young woman in athletic wear heading home from an evening workout. By the time she reached her motorcycle, her phone was ringing. "Papa," she answered, securing her helmet. "Come home." Antonio Moretti's voice was strained. "We need to talk." "The job's done, clean as always." "It's not about the job." A pause. "It's about your future." Something in his tone made Valentina's stomach tighten. "What did you do?" "Just come home, Tesoro. Please." The Moretti estate sprawled across 3 acres in Beverly Hills, a fortress disguised as a Mediterranean villa. Valentina found her father in his study, staring at the portrait of her mother, dead now for 5 years, cancer having succeeded where bullets and bombs had failed. "The commission called a meeting," Antonio said without preamble. "They've ordered an alliance." Valentina set down her helmet. "What kind of alliance?" "The permanent kind." He turned to face her, and she saw something she'd rarely witnessed in her father's eyes. Regret. "You're to marry Lorenzo De Luca." The room spun. "No." The word came out sharp, final. "Absolutely not." "Valentina, he killed Marco!" Her voice cracked, years of contained grief exploding outward. "My brother, your son, Lorenzo De Luca led that raid, Papa. He gave the order that put Marco in the ground, and you want me to marry him? I want you to survive." Antonio crossed to her, gripping her shoulders. "If you refuse, the commission will see it as defiance. The other families will turn on us. We'll be destroyed within a month. Then we fight. Against everyone, we're strong, but not that strong." His hands tightened. "This is the only way, Valentina. You marry Lorenzo, unite the families, and we become untouchable." She jerked away from him. "You're asking me to share a bed with my brother's murderer?" "I'm asking you to save your family." His voice hardened. "This is the life we chose. We don't get happy endings. We get survival." Valentina stared at her father. This man who'd taught her to shoot before she could drive, who'd molded her into a weapon, and then acted surprised when she wanted to use it against their enemies rather than herself. "I hate you for this," she whispered. "I know." He looked old suddenly, worn. "But you'll do it anyway, because you're a Moretti and we do what we must." The engagement dinner was held at Spago, Wolfgang Puck's legendary restaurant in Beverly Hills, closed to the public for the evening. Both families arrived separately, flanked by security, tension thick enough to choke on. Lorenzo entered first, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, his dark hair perfectly styled, his expression utterly neutral. He moved like a predator, controlled and lethal, his eyes scanning the room with tactical precision. He didn't look at Valentina when she entered 5 minutes later, but she looked at him. God help her, she looked. He was exactly as she remembered from Marco's funeral, tall, broad-shouldered, devastatingly handsome in that cold, untouchable way. But seeing him across the cemetery was different from sitting across a table, knowing she'd be bound to this man, this monster, for the rest of her life. Valentina wore a blood-red dress, fitted and elegant, her dark hair swept up to expose the graceful column of her neck. She'd chosen the color deliberately, a reminder of what stood between them, of the price already paid. Lorenzo's eyes finally found her as she approached, and something flickered in their depths. Not quite surprise, not quite appreciation, just acknowledgement. "Miss Moretti," he said, his voice like smoke and gravel. "Mr. De Luca." She didn't offer her hand, neither did he. They sat across from each other, their families filling in around them, Giovanni Russo playing master of ceremonies. Champagne was poured, toasts were made, pretty words about unity and peace and the future. All lies. "So," Lorenzo said quietly, speaking to her directly for the first time, "how does it feel to be a political pawn?" Valentina's smile was sharp as broken glass. "I wouldn't know. I'm not the one who takes orders from the commission." "Is that so?" He sipped his champagne, utterly relaxed. "Then you're here of your own free will? How progressive. Better a pawn than a coward who needs to hide behind arranged marriages." His eyes darkened. Careful, princess, your claws are showing. And your humanity is hiding. Oh, wait. She leaned forward slightly. You never had any to begin with. Around them, conversation had stopped. Both families watched, uncertain whether to intervene or simply enjoy the spectacle of their children destroying each other with words since they couldn't use weapons. Giovanni cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss the living arrangements. I have conditions, Valentina announced, her gaze never leaving Lorenzo's. I keep my own bedroom, my own space. You don't touch me outside of necessary public appearances, and I will not play the doting wife for your ego. Lorenzo set down his glass with deliberate care. Interesting. I have conditions too. You will show me respect in front of my organization. You will not undermine my authority, and whatever you do in the shadows. His eyes flicked knowingly to her hands as if he could see the gun oil she'd scrubbed from beneath her nails. Will not blow back on me. Agreed. Agreed. They stared at each other, electric hatred crackling between them like lightning before a storm. This was going to be a disaster. Lorenzo's estate in the Hollywood Hills was a modernist masterpiece of glass and steel, perched on the hillside like an eagle's nest overlooking the city. Valentina arrived 3 days later with a single suitcase and her favorite rifle case, which she made no attempt to hide. The staff showed her to the East Wing, a bedroom suite larger than her previous apartment, all clean lines and expensive minimalism. A king bed dominated one wall, facing floor-to-ceiling windows with a view that probably cost $1 million per square foot. Lorenzo was waiting when she emerged, leaning against the hallway wall with casual elegance. Settled in? He asked. Surveyed the exits, identified the security system, counted your guards. She crossed her arms. Yes, I'm settled. A ghost of something, amusement, touched his lips. Most women would focus on the closet space. I'm not most women. Clearly. He pushed off the wall, closing the distance between them until she could smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive, cedar and smoke. Let me be clear about how this arrangement works, Valentina. In public, you're my devoted fiancé. In private, we maintain our distance. But under no circumstances do you disrespect me in front of my people. Understood? She tilted her head back to meet his eyes. Even in heels, she had to look up. He was easily 6'2", built like someone who'd grown up fighting for survival. Respect is earned, not demanded. Then you'll have a long engagement. He turned to leave, then paused. Dinner is at 8. You're expected to attend. And if I don't, then I'll come get you myself. The threat in his voice was silk-wrapped steel, and neither of us will enjoy it. He left, and Valentina discovered something disturbing. Her heart was racing. From anger, she told herself. Just anger. Dinner was a tense affair, served by silent staff in a dining room designed to intimidate. Lorenzo sat at the head of the table, Valentina to his right, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He'd changed into a simple black shirt, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars, working man's arms despite his wealth. A reminder that he'd built his empire with violence, not inheritance. How long have you been a sniper? He asked abruptly, cutting into his steak. Valentina froze, wine glass halfway to her lips. Excuse me? The rifle case. The way you move, economical, precise. The callus on your trigger finger. His eyes met hers. You're not just the pretty princess they parade around. You're an assassin. She set down her glass very carefully. Careful, Lorenzo. Your reconnaissance is showing. It's not reconnaissance. It's observation. He chewed thoughtfully. How many? How many what? Kills. The word hung between them like a knife. 47, she said finally, deciding honesty was more disturbing than evasion. All threats to my family, all deserved. To her surprise, he nodded. Clean? Always? Good. He returned to his meal as if they'd discussed the weather. I respect competence, even in the daughter of your enemy. Especially then. It means you're not as soft as I feared. He poured more wine into both their glasses. A weak wife is a liability. At least you can defend yourself. From everyone except you? his hand stilled on the wine bottle. You think you need defending from me? You killed my brother. The words came out flat, emotionless, years of grief compressed into ice. So yes, I think I need defending from you. Lorenzo set down the bottle, his expression finally showing something beyond cold calculation, something that might have been regret in a man capable of such things. Marco Moretti died in a raid on one of my warehouses, he said quietly. A raid he led, a raid that killed 3 of my men. He was trying to stop you from expanding into our territory. He was trying to kill me. Lorenzo's voice hardened. I defended myself. That's not murder, Valentina. That's survival. You could have let him live. Could I? He leaned back, studying her with those unreadable eyes. If I'd shown mercy to a Moretti that night, it would have been seen as weakness. The other families would have circled like sharks. More people would have died, including eventually you. She wanted to argue, to rage, to throw her wine in his face. But a treacherous part of her brain recognized the truth in his words. This life they led, this world of blood and honor and ancient grudges, it didn't allow for mercy. I still hate you for it, she said. Good. He raised his glass in a mock toast. Hate is honest. I can work with hate. They finished dinner in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now, charged, aware, dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with violence. The weeks crawled by, in a strange dance of avoidance and unavoidable proximity. They attended functions together, played their roles perfectly, the powerful Don and his beautiful fiancée, Lorenzo's hand at the small of her back guiding her through crowds, Valentina's fingers on his arm smiling for cameras while mentally calculating 50 ways to kill him. But at home, they orbited each other like hostile planets, maintaining careful distance. Until the night everything changed. Valentina was in the home gym at midnight, working the heavy bag with bare fists, trying to exhaust herself enough to sleep without dreaming of Marco. She'd stripped down to a sports bra and leggings, her hair pulled back, sweat gleaming on her skin. She didn't hear Lorenzo enter, didn't notice him watching from the doorway as she unleashed precise, devastating combinations on the leather bag. You're dropping your right shoulder, he said. She spun, fists raised, then forced herself to relax. Spying on me? My house. My gym. He stepped inside, barefoot, wearing only black pajama pants slung low on his hips. His torso was a road map of scars, bullets, knives, burns. A body that had survived things that would have killed softer men. You're good, but that dropped shoulder will get you killed eventually. I've survived this long. Against targets who weren't expecting you. He moved behind the bag, holding it steady. Again, let me see. She should have left, should have maintained their careful distance. Instead, she found herself falling into her stance, launching another combination. He watched with a fighter's eye, adjusting his position. Again. Harder. She hit harder. Faster, faster. Her fists blurred, sweat flying, breath coming in controlled gasps. The bag thundered under her assault, and Lorenzo held it steady, his muscles flexing with the effort, his eyes never leaving her. Better, he said finally. But you're still thinking too much. Fighting isn't chess. It's instinct. Easy for you to say. You're twice my size. Size doesn't matter if you're fast enough, smart enough. He came around the bag, facing her. Hit me. What? You heard me. Hit me. He spread his arms slightly. You've wanted to since the moment we met. Now's your chance. It was a trap. Had to be. But Valentina couldn't resist. She feinted left, struck right, aiming for his ribs. He caught her wrist mid-strike, twisted, and suddenly she was spun around, her back pressed against his chest, his arm across her collarbone. Predictable, he murmured in her ear. You're angry, so you strike angry. That's how you get hurt. Let go. Her voice was steady, but her heart was hammering. Make me. She stomped on his instep, drove her elbow back into his stomach, twisted out of his grip. Good moves. Textbook moves. But Lorenzo was faster. He caught her again, and this time they went down together, rolling across the gym mat, each fighting for control. It was nothing like sparring. It was fierce and desperate and far too intimate, their bodies pressed together, breath mingling. Hands gripping, they ended with Lorenzo pinning her wrists above her head, his body covering hers, both of them panting. "I win," he said, "only because you're heavier." "Excuses." But his voice had roughened and his eyes had dropped to her lips. The moment stretched. Outside, Los Angeles hummed and glittered, oblivious. Inside, something dangerous shifted between them. Valentina felt it in the way his grip on her wrist gentled, in the way his breathing matched hers, in the sudden, shocking awareness of every place their bodies touched. "You should let me go," she whispered. "I should." But he didn't move, and neither did she. The air between them felt electric, charged with all the things they wouldn't say. Hate, yes, anger and grief and vengeance, but underneath? Underneath was something neither of them wanted to name. Lorenzo released her wrists abruptly, rolling away and standing in one fluid motion. "It's late. You should get some rest." Valentina sat up slowly, her body still humming with adrenaline and something else, something she refused to examine. "Lorenzo?" "Good night, Valentina." He left before she could finish, leaving her alone on the mat, heart racing, body aching, and furious with herself for feeling anything other than hate. The ambush came 2 weeks before the wedding. They'd been attending a charity gala at the Getty Center, mingling with Los Angeles' elite. Celebrities and criminals, often the same people. Valentina wore midnight blue silk, diamonds at her throat, Lorenzo's hand possessive at her waist as they navigated the crowd. They were playing their parts perfectly. The smitten couple, the alliance that would end decades of war. They never saw the assault coming. The gunman hit during the fireworks, using the noise as cover. Automatic weapons fire shredded the elegant evening, sending socialites screaming, security scrambling, and both the DeLuca and Moretti guards reaching for their weapons. Lorenzo shoved Valentina behind a marble column as bullets chewed into the space where she'd been standing. "Stay down!" "Like hell!" She kicked off her heels, grabbed the pistol she knew he kept in an ankle holster, she'd noticed it weeks ago, and returned fire with devastating accuracy. 3 gunmen went down in as many seconds. "Christ," Lorenzo breathed, half impressed, half horrified. "You really are—" An explosion cut him off. Smoke and debris filled the courtyard. In the chaos, masked men surged forward, and Valentina realized with cold clarity this wasn't just an attack, it was an assassination attempt. On both of them. Lorenzo fought like the street brawler he'd once been, efficient and brutal, dropping attackers with controlled violence. But there were too many, and they were too exposed. A gunman broke through, aiming for Lorenzo's head. Valentina shot him through the throat before her fiancé even registered the threat. Lorenzo glanced at her, something like respect flashing in his eyes. "We need to—" Another explosion. Closer this time. The column they'd been using for cover cracked, marble chunks raining down. Lorenzo grabbed her hand. "Move!" They ran together through the chaos, Lorenzo clearing a path while Valentina covered their backs. His security team was fighting their way toward them, but the attackers had planned well, splitting both families' forces, causing maximum confusion. They made it to the parking structure, but 3 gunmen were waiting. Lorenzo took down 2, but the third got a shot off. Time slowed. Valentina saw it happening, the trajectory, the inevitability, the bullet meant for her chest. Lorenzo saw it too, and without hesitation, without thought, he stepped in front of her. The impact spun him around. Blood bloomed across his white dress shirt, stark and terrible. He staggered, and Valentina caught him, lowering him to the concrete as his knees buckled. "No." The word tore out of her. "No, no, no." The third gunman raised his weapon again. Something cold and terrible settled over Valentina. She laid Lorenzo down gently, picked up his fallen gun, and in one smooth motion, shot the gunman between the eyes. Then she grabbed her phone, still in her clutch, and called her spotter. "I need an exfil. Getty Center parking. 1 injured, code red. Now." Lorenzo's blood was warm on her hands. His face had gone pale, but his eyes stayed on her, intense and strange. "You saved me," he said, his voice weak. "You saved me first, you idiot." She pressed her hands against the wound, trying to slow the bleeding. "Why did you do that? Instinct." He coughed, grimacing. "Stupid instinct. Don't talk. Save your strength." "Valentina." His hand found hers, slick with blood. "You were the first thing I ever feared losing." The words hit her harder than any bullet. Around them, sirens wailed. Security was regaining control. But in that moment, in that blood-soaked parking structure, something fundamental shifted between them. She looked down at this man, this enemy, this stranger she was supposed to marry, and realized with terrifying clarity that she didn't want him to die. Not anymore. Maybe not ever. "Stay with me," she commanded, her voice fierce. "That's an order, DeLuca. You don't get to die before our wedding. I won't allow it." He managed a ghost of his usual smirk. "Yes, ma'am." Then his eyes closed and Valentina's world narrowed to the sound of approaching ambulances and the desperate rhythm of his pulse beneath her fingers. Lorenzo survived. The bullet had missed his heart by inches. Luck, or perhaps something more deliberate in how he'd positioned himself. The doctors at Cedars-Sinai, who were used to treating gunshot wounds without asking questions, patched him up efficiently. Valentina refused to leave his side. She sat in his private hospital room, still wearing her blood-stained evening gown, diamonds incongruous against the gore. The DeLuca security detail tried to convince her to go home, change, rest. She ignored them all. When Lorenzo finally woke, groggy from anesthesia, the first thing he saw was her face. "You look terrible," he murmured. "You were shot." "I've been shot before." He tried to sit up, winced, gave up. "This one just hurt more. Because you're getting old? Because I took it for you." His eyes found hers, clearer now. "They weren't shooting randomly, Valentina. Those gunmen were targeting us specifically. Both families at once." "I know." She'd had hours to think about it, to analyze the attack pattern. Someone wants the alliance to fail, someone who benefits from our families at war. A third faction. Lorenzo shifted, trying to get comfortable. The commission should have predicted this. Or they did, and were acceptable casualties. The thought hung between them, dark and dangerous. Lorenzo reached for her hand, his fingers wrapping around hers. The gesture was so natural, so unexpected, that Valentina almost pulled away. Almost. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for saving me, for staying. Don't read too much into it. You're no good to me dead." But her voice lacked conviction. "Liar." His thumb traced the back of her hand. "You called me an idiot for taking that bullet." "Because it was idiotic." "Was it?" His eyes searched hers. "You would have died, Valentina, and I discovered in that moment that I couldn't let that happen, even if it cost me everything." Her breath caught. "Lorenzo, I know we hate each other. You blame me for your brother, I blame your family for my mother, but somewhere in the last month something changed." His grip tightened. "Tell me I'm not the only one who feels it." She should lie, should maintain the walls they'd built. But something about seeing him bleeding, about holding his life in her hands, had cracked her defenses. "You're not," she admitted, the words barely audible. "I don't know what it is, proximity, maybe, Stockholm Syndrome, but I don't want you dead anymore." High praise. "Don't push your luck, DeLuca." He laughed, then groaned at the pain it caused. "Remind me not to do that for a while." Valentina found herself smiling, despite everything. "I'll add it to the list of things you're not allowed to do, right after taking bullets for me. No promises." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Their hands still intertwined, both trying to process what had shifted between them. Outside, dawn was breaking over Los Angeles, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. "We need to find out who's behind the attack," Lorenzo said eventually, "before the wedding, before they try again." "Agreed." Valentina's mind was already working, tactical and cold. "I have contacts in the intelligence community, people who owe me favors. And I have the commission's resources." He squeezed her hand once before releasing it. "We work together on this? Partners?" "If only temporarily." She stood, finally ready to leave, to change and arm herself properly. But at the door, she paused. "Lorenzo, what you said earlier about being afraid of losing me." "Yes?" "I felt it too. When you went down, I felt..." She struggled for words. "Terror. Real terror. Not the tactical kind, the personal kind." Is that your way of saying you care? Don't let it go to your head. But she was smiling as she left, and for the first time since the engagement was announced, the smile was real. The investigation took 3 days and led them somewhere neither expected, directly back to their own families. Lorenzo's most trusted lieutenant provided the first clue: financial records showing weapons purchases that didn't match any DeLuca operations. Valentina's hacker traced the money to a shell corporation registered to someone they both knew: Roberto Santoro, Antonio Moretti's second in command, the man who'd been at Lorenzo's mother's side the night she died, the man who'd supposedly tried to save her. They confronted Antonio Moretti first, meeting at the family estate in Beverly Hills with both security details on high alert. Roberto? Antonio's face went white. That's impossible. He's been with me for 30 years. The evidence doesn't lie, Papa. Valentina laid out the financial documents, the communications, the pattern of manipulation that had spanned more than a decade. He's been playing both sides, feeding intelligence to whoever would pay, escalating the blood feud to cover his tracks. He killed Lorenzo's mother, Lorenzo added, his voice cold and precise. Made it look like your hit. Then he positioned himself as your most loyal man, feeding you false intelligence, pushing you toward conflict with my family at every turn. Antonio sank into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. Maria's death. It was Roberto, all these years. And Marco, Valentina said quietly. The raid that killed my brother, Roberto fed him the intel about that warehouse, set him up. He wanted Marco dead because Marco was getting suspicious, asking too many questions about family finances. Lorenzo added, he's been planning to use the chaos from a failed alliance to seize control of both organizations. With us at war, weakened, he'd step in as the peacemaker, take everything. Where is he now? Antonio's voice was pure ice. That's the problem, Lorenzo said. He's disappeared, as of 3 days ago, right after the attack at the Getty. The three of them looked at each other, decades of enmity dissolving in the face of mutual betrayal. We find him, Antonio said. Together, the three of us, and we end this. They found Roberto Santoro in a warehouse in Vernon, the industrial heart of Los Angeles, preparing to flee the country. He'd been cautious, but not cautious enough. Not when two crime families united their resources to hunt him. The warehouse was cold and dark, lit only by sodium vapor lights that cast everything in sickly yellow. Roberto stood in the center, surrounded by cases of money and weapons, his escape route planned down to the minute. Except they'd arrived 10 minutes early. Lorenzo entered from the front, flanked by his men, Antonio from the side, with his security, and Valentina. Valentina was already in position on the catwalk above, her sniper rifle assembled and aimed, her breathing steady. Roberto, Lorenzo called out, his voice echoing. It's over. The older man spun, reaching for a weapon, then froze when he saw the forces arrayed against him. His eyes darted between Lorenzo and Antonio, calculating his chances. You're supposed to be at war, he said finally, a thin smile on his lips. The attack should have pushed you over the edge. It did? Antonio stepped forward, his face a mask of controlled fury. But not in the direction you wanted. You killed my son, Roberto. Marco, who trusted you, who looked up to you. Marco was weak. Like his father, Roberto's mask slipped, showing the contempt beneath. You've all grown soft. This business requires strength, not sentiment. You murdered my mother, Lorenzo said, each word precise as a knife cut. Made it look like the Morettis. Kept the blood feud alive for 12 years. Why? Power, Roberto shrugged. Simple as that. As long as you were fighting each other, neither family could consolidate control. I positioned myself to pick up the pieces. I would have succeeded too if the commission hadn't forced this ridiculous marriage. So you tried to kill us both at the Getty. And I'll try again and again until... Valentina's shot echoed through the warehouse. Roberto went down, clutching his leg, his weapon skittering across the concrete. Not a kill shot. Valentina had aimed carefully, precisely. He wouldn't die quickly. She descended from the catwalk, rifle slung over her shoulder, her expression carved from ice. That was for Marco, she said. Everything else is for my father to decide. Antonio approached Roberto slowly, drawing a pistol from inside his jacket. 30 years, Roberto. I trusted you with everything, my family, my life. Antonio, Roberto tried to rise, failed. We can make a deal. I have money, connections. You have nothing. Antonio cocked the pistol. And you are nothing, just another traitor who thought he was smarter than he was. The shot was quick, clean, final. In the silence that followed, the three of them stood in the yellow light, united by blood and vengeance and the strange, fragile thing growing between Lorenzo and Valentina. It's done, Antonio said quietly. The feud, the betrayal, all of it. He turned to Lorenzo. You saved my daughter's life. You uncovered the truth about my son, the debt between our families. Consider it paid. Lorenzo nodded slowly. And the alliance? That's not my decision anymore. Antonio looked at Valentina. It's hers. All eyes turned to her. Valentina stood there, rifle still, across her shoulder, blood spatter on her clothes, and realized that, for the first time in 12 years, she had a choice. She could walk away, call off the wedding, return to her life as the shadow assassin, the Moretti princess who answered to no one, or she could step forward into the unknown. Her eyes found Lorenzo's. This man who'd killed for her family's empire, who'd taken a bullet meant for her, who'd spent the last month showing her that maybe, just maybe, he was more than the monster she'd built in her mind. The alliance stands, she said, but on my terms. Name them, Lorenzo said. We rule together, equal partners. You don't make decisions without me. I don't act without consulting you. We combine the families, yes, but we do it as a team, not as dawn and decoration. Lorenzo stepped closer until they were just feet apart. And the marriage? Still just political convenience? I don't know what it is yet, she admitted, but I know I don't want you dead. I know that when you went down at the Getty, I felt something I haven't felt since Marco died. Real fear, personal fear. She held his gaze. I know that I think about you constantly, even when I'm trying not to. That I hate how much I don't hate you anymore. A smile ghosted across his lips. That might be the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Don't push it, DeLuca. Wouldn't dream of it, Moretti. He extended his hand. Partners, then. In business and whatever this is between us. She took his hand. His palm was warm against hers, calloused and strong. Partners. Antonio cleared his throat. I'll leave you two to work out the details. I have a mess to clean up here. He glanced at Roberto's body without emotion. And some people to notify. As he left with his security detail, Lorenzo and Valentina stood alone in the warehouse, still holding hands, the weight of the last month settling over them. We're getting married in 3 days, Gasa, Lorenzo said. I'm aware. Do you want to postpone? Now that we know the truth, the commission might— No. The word came out firm, certain. We see this through, together. Even though you still hate me? I never said I stopped hating you. But her thumb was tracing circles on the back of his hand, unconscious and intimate. I just said I care whether you live or die. Those things can coexist. Complex woman. You expected simple? Lorenzo laughed, then pulled her closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face. I expected nothing about you, Valentina Moretti, and you've surprised me at every turn. Her breath caught as his thumb brushed her cheekbone. Lorenzo, tell me to stop and I will. Tell me this is still just politics and a piece of paper and I'll believe you. His eyes searched hers. But tell me the truth. The truth was complicated. The truth was that she'd spent a month trying not to notice how he took his coffee black, how he was always the last one to bed and first one awake, how he treated his staff with respect despite his reputation for ruthlessness. The truth was that she'd caught herself staring at his hands, his shoulders, the way he moved through space like violence contained in an expensive suit. The truth was that her body had been betraying her for weeks, responding to his proximity with a hunger that had nothing to do with hate. The truth, she said quietly, is that I want you to kiss me, and I hate myself for wanting it. Good. His smile was dark and promising. Hate makes everything more interesting. Then his lips were on hers, and Valentina discovered that kissing Lorenzo De Luca was like stepping into fire, dangerous, consuming, and completely impossible to walk away from. He kissed her like he did everything else, with total commitment and lethal precision. His hand slid into her hair, angling her head exactly where he wanted it, while his other arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him. She kissed him back with equal ferocity, months of tension and anger and unwanted attraction pouring into the contact. Her rifle clattered to the ground, forgotten, as her hands found his chest, his shoulders, the back of his neck. They broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. "This doesn't change anything," Valentina said. "Liar. I still blame you for Marco." "I know." He kissed her again, softer this time. "And I still see your father's face when I think about my mother. We're both carrying corpses into this marriage, Valentina. The question is whether we're strong enough to lay them down." She pulled back to look at him properly. "I don't know if I can." "Then we figure it out together." His hand cupped her face again. "No more secrets, no more games. We go into this honestly, whatever this becomes." "Partners in crime," she said. "And maybe," he added, "something more." The wedding took place in a private garden in Malibu, overlooking the Pacific. 300 guests, crime families from across the country, politicians, business moguls, all the beautiful and damned who populated their world. Valentina wore white because irony was important. The dress was stunning, Vera Wang, custom-made, elegant, and lethal all at once. She looked like an angel and felt like a weapon. Lorenzo stood at the altar in a black tuxedo that probably cost more than some people's houses, watching her approach with an expression that made her stomach flip. Not cold anymore, not distant, but hungry, possessive, real. When she reached him, he took her hand. "You look," he started, "like someone you'd die for?" She finished, smiling slightly. "I already proved that," he smiled back. "Now I'm looking forward to living for you instead." The ceremony was traditional, overseen by a judge who'd been in the commission's pocket for decades. They exchanged vows that promised loyalty, partnership, unity, standard words for an extraordinary arrangement. But when the judge pronounced them married and Lorenzo kissed her, there was nothing standard about it. He kissed her like he'd been waiting his entire life for permission, like she was the only real thing in a world of shadows and lies. And Valentina kissed him back with equal intensity, months of resistance finally breaking, letting herself feel everything she'd been fighting. The guests applauded, cameras flashed, two families that had been at war for 12 years finally united. But Valentina barely noticed. Her entire world had narrowed to the man holding her, and the terrifying, exhilarating realization that she'd married him willingly, that somewhere between hate and necessity, she'd found something that might actually be love. The reception was pure spectacle. Champagne towers and string quartets and speeches that talked about peace and prosperity while carefully avoiding words like murder and territory and empire. Lorenzo kept Valentina close, his hand perpetually at her back or laced with hers, marking her as his in ways both subtle and obvious. She found she didn't mind. In fact, she found herself leaning into it, into him, accepting touches she would have scorned 6 weeks ago. They danced together as husband and wife, moving in perfect synchronization despite never having practiced. "You're good at this," she murmured. "At dancing? At making people believe this is real." Lorenzo's hand tightened at her waist. "Who says I'm pretending?" Before she could respond, he spun her out and back in, dipping her dramatically. She laughed, actually laughed, and saw his eyes light up with something fierce and warm. "There it is," he said softly. "I was wondering if you'd ever smile at me like that, like I'm not a monster." "You are a monster," she said, but there was no heat in it. "We both are. The difference is, I'm starting to think we're the same kind of monster." "Good. I'd hate to be married to someone boring." The night wore on, toasts were made, gifts were presented, and through it all, Valentina felt Lorenzo's attention like a physical touch, constant and consuming. When they finally escaped to his car, now their car, for the drive back to the Hollywood Hills, she felt wired, electric, every nerve ending aware of the man beside her. Tired? He asked, navigating the curves of Mulholland Drive. No. Regrets? Not yet. Ask me again in the morning. He laughed. Fair enough. They drove in comfortable silence until Lorenzo pulled into the estate's gates. The house blazed with lights, but he'd given the staff the night off. They were truly alone for the first time as husband and wife. Inside, Valentina kicked off her heels, immediately losing 4 inches of height. Lorenzo shrugged out of his tuxedo jacket, loosening his bow tie with practiced efficiency. They stood in the foyer, suddenly awkward. All the easy physicality from earlier in the evening evaporated, replaced by the weight of expectation. I should, Valentina started. We don't have to, Lorenzo said at the same time. They stopped, smiled. This is ridiculous, Valentina said. We've been living together for a month. Different context. Lorenzo moved closer. A month ago, you would have shot me if I'd tried to follow you to your bedroom. I still might. But her eyes betrayed her, dropping to his mouth. Valentina. He cupped her face in both hands. Tell me what you want. Honestly, we've built this alliance on truth. Don't stop now. She took a breath, steadying herself. I want to stop fighting this. Whatever this is between us, attraction, insanity, Stockholm syndrome, I'm tired of resisting it. Is that a yes? That's a I married you and I want my wedding night to mean something. Lorenzo's smile was slow and devastating. Then let me give you a wedding night worth remembering. He kissed her then, deep and hungry, and Valentina kissed back with all the pent-up frustration and desire of the last month. His hands moved to her waist, finding the zipper of her dress, sliding it down with practiced ease. Bedroom, she managed between kisses. Too far. He lifted her easily, her legs wrapping around his waist, and carried her to the living room. They fell onto the white leather sofa together, a tangle of expensive fabric and desperate hands. Wait, Valentina pushed at his chest. I need to say something first. Lorenzo pulled back, breathing hard. Now? Now. She met his eyes. This doesn't erase everything. I still carry Marco's death. You still carry your mother's murder. We're still built on blood and violence and things that can't be forgiven. I know. But somewhere in all of that I found you, the real you, and she struggled with the words. I think I could love that person, if you let me. Lorenzo's expression softened into something she'd never seen before. Vulnerability, hope. I think I already love you, Valentina. I just didn't know it until I was bleeding out in a parking lot, terrified I'd never get the chance to tell you. Tears pricked her eyes, the first she'd shed since Marco's funeral. We're disasters. We're perfect disasters. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. Together. What followed was heat and hunger and the desperate need to be closer, to eliminate every barrier between them. They shed clothes between kisses, reverent and rushed all at once. When they finally came together, it was with a completeness that shocked them both, as if all the fighting and hating and resisting had been leading to exactly this moment. They moved together with the same synchronization they'd shown on the dance floor, learning each other's rhythms, pushing each other higher. Valentina dug her nails into Lorenzo's shoulders, leaving marks that would last for days. Lorenzo buried his face in her neck, breathing her in like she was oxygen itself. When they finally shattered together, it was complete and perfect and terrifying in its intensity. Afterward, they lay tangled on the sofa, hearts racing, skin slick with sweat. So, Lorenzo said eventually, wedding night worth remembering? Valentina laughed breathlessly. I hate you. No, you don't. No, she admitted, tracing patterns on his chest. I really don't. Not anymore. The next 6 months were a revelation. The combined DeLuca Moretti syndicate became the most powerful crime organization on the West Coast. Under Lorenzo and Valentina's joint leadership, they streamlined operations, eliminated rival factions, and brought a level of sophistication to the business that had never existed before. Lorenzo taught Valentina the art of negotiation, of when to show mercy and when to show strength. Valentina taught Lorenzo that Violence wasn't always the answer, that precision could be more effective than brute force. They were formidable separately. Together, they were unstoppable, but more than that, they were happy. It shocked them both, this strange, fierce happiness that had grown from the ashes of hate. They fought still, of course. Both were too strong willed, too stubborn to simply agree on everything. But the fights were honest now, productive, ending more often than not with them in bed, working out their differences in more pleasurable ways. Lorenzo learned that Valentina sang in the shower when she thought he couldn't hear, that she was secretly addicted to trashy reality TV, that she cried when she talked about Marco, and those tears were sacred, never to be dismissed. Valentina learned that Lorenzo had nightmares about his mother's death, that he donated anonymously to children's charities, that beneath the cold exterior he felt everything, he'd just learned to bury it so deep that even he forgot it was there. They learned each other, piece by piece, scar by scar. 6 months after the wedding, on a quiet Sunday morning, they lay in bed together, sunlight streaming through the windows, the city sprawling below them. "I have something to tell you," Valentina said, her head on Lorenzo's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "If it's about the thing with the Russian shipping contract, I already know. You're better at negotiation than you give yourself credit for." "Not that." She sat up, pulling the sheet around herself, suddenly nervous. "Something else." Lorenzo propped himself up on his elbows, concerned. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant." Silence. Then Lorenzo was pulling her to him, kissing her deeply, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. "Are you sure?" he asked. 3 tests, all positive. She searched his face for his reaction. "I know we never discussed this, that it wasn't part of the plan." "Fuck the plan." He kissed her again. "This is better than any plan. You want this? A child? With me?" "Valentina." He looked at her with such intensity it stole her breath. "I want everything with you. A child, a life, a future I never thought I'd have. You gave me that. You gave me the ability to feel again." She felt tears slip down her cheeks. "We're going to screw this up so badly." "Probably." He wiped away her tears. "But we'll screw it up together, and we'll figure it out, just like we've figured everything else out." Partners? Always. They held each other as the sun climbed higher, warming their intertwined bodies, and for the first time since Marco died, Valentina felt complete, whole, home. The baby girl was born 8 months later, in the same hospital where Lorenzo had recovered from his gunshot wound. They named her Maria Marcella, after Lorenzo's mother and Valentina's brother, a bridge between 2 families, a promise of peace built from love instead of violence. Valentina held her daughter and wept. Lorenzo held them both and felt something shift in his chest, the final piece of ice around his heart melting completely. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She's ours," Valentina corrected. Antonio visited that afternoon, looking at his granddaughter with tears in his eyes. "Marco would have loved her. He would have," Valentina agreed. "And wherever he is, I hope he knows that something good came from all the pain. That we found peace. That we found love." Lorenzo stood at the window looking out at Los Angeles. His city, their city, now his daughter's city. The empire they'd built together stretched out beneath them, powerful and unified, a testament to what was possible when enemies chose love over hate. Behind him, Valentina laughed at something her father said, the sound light and free and nothing like the broken woman he'd married 6 months ago. He'd given her that lightness back, and she'd given him the ability to feel, to love, to be something more than the cold, empty man he'd been. They'd both been monsters, killers, products of a violent world that demanded violence in return, but together they'd become something else. They'd become human. 5 years later, the DeLuca Moretti estate had been transformed. Where once there had been cold modernist perfection, now there were toys scattered on the floor, children's drawings taped to the refrigerator, evidence of life and love and messy, imperfect joy. Lorenzo stood in the kitchen, making breakfast while Maria played nearby, chattering in English and Italian, her dark curls, so like her mother's, bouncing as she danced her dolls across the counter. "Papa, can we go to the park?" she asked. "We'll see what Mama says." "Mama always says yes when you ask." Maria grinned, precocious and clever and already learning how to work her parents. Valentina entered, carrying their son, 2-year-old Antonio, named after his grandfather. She'd retired from active operations after Maria's birth, though she still consulted on security and strategy. Turned out being a mother to 2 small children was more demanding than being an assassin. Lorenzo took his son, settling the toddler on his hip while he flipped pancakes one-handed. "Your daughter wants to go to the park." "My daughter?" Valentina laughed. "She's only mine when she wants something. That's because she knows you're the soft touch." Says the man who bought her a pony last month. "That was a training exercise," Lorenzo said with mock seriousness. "Character building." Maria giggled. "Mama, Papa's being silly again." "I know, baby. It's one of his few flaws." Lorenzo set down the spatula, pulled Valentina to him with his free arm, and kissed her soundly. "My only flaw is loving you too much." "Gross," Maria announced, but she was smiling. She'd never known a world where her parents didn't love each other, didn't touch constantly, didn't look at each other like the other person was their entire world. After breakfast, they went to the park, the 4 of them, plus a security detail that hung back discreetly. The business had evolved, becoming more legitimate year by year, but old enemies and old habits died hard. Safety was still paramount. Lorenzo pushed Maria on the swings while Valentina supervised Antonio in the sandbox. They looked like any other family spending a Sunday morning together. Beautiful, happy, normal. No one would guess they'd built their empire on blood and bullets. No one would know they'd started as enemies who'd hated each other with perfect clarity. Watching Lorenzo with their children, Valentina felt her heart swell with something that still surprised her. Even after 5 years, pure, uncomplicated happiness. He caught her looking and smiled. That special smile he reserved only for her, soft and genuine and nothing like the cold mask he showed the world. "What?" he mouthed. "I love you," she mouthed back. "I know." And he did. They both did. They said it every day, multiple times, as if making up for the year of hate that had preceded their love, as if reminding themselves that they'd survived the impossible and come out stronger. That night, after the children were asleep, they sat on their bedroom balcony, sharing a bottle of wine, watching the city lights twinkle below. "Do you ever miss it?" Lorenzo asked. "The action? The danger?" "Sometimes," Valentina admitted. "But then I look at what we have now, and I realize I wouldn't trade it for anything. This life, these children, it's everything I never knew I wanted, even though I'm the monster who killed your brother." It was the first time he'd mentioned Marco in years. They'd built their peace partly by not looking back too often, by focusing on the future instead of the past. Valentina took his hand. "Roberto killed Marco. You were just the weapon he pointed. And I've forgiven you for that. I forgave you a long time ago." She squeezed his fingers. "Have you forgiven my father?" "For my mother?" Lorenzo was quiet for a moment. "I don't think I'll ever fully forgive him for being there that night, even though I know Roberto pulled the trigger. But I've made peace with it. He gave me you. He loves our children. That has to be enough." "It is enough." She kissed him softly. "We're enough. This family we built from ruins. It's more than enough." They sat together as the night deepened, 2 former enemies who'd become lovers, then partners, then parents, who'd taken the worst their world could throw at them and transformed it into something beautiful. The Don who felt nothing had learned to feel everything. The sniper princess had laid down her rifle and picked up her children instead. And the alliance that was supposed to be political convenience had become the greatest love story their world had ever seen. In the end, they'd rewritten history, not with violence, but with love. And that, Valentina thought, as Lorenzo pulled her closer, was the greatest victory of all. The end. If you enjoyed this story of redemption and unlikely love, please like and subscribe. Your support helps us create more content that explores the complex spaces between hate and love. between who we're forced to be and who we choose to become. Until next time.